Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the ForeFlight IFR flight plan filing webinar. My name is Rob MacLeod. I'm an aircraft dispatcher, commercial pilot, AGI. I have a Phenom 300 type rating, and I am the leader of the flight operations team. With me today is Tim Stahl, and I'll let Tim say hello to you.
Howdy, I'm Tim Stahl. I'm an aircraft dispatcher and commercial pilot as well. I don't fly the Phenom 300, though. Is it a phenomenal airplane?
It's pretty phenomenal,
yeah,
Tim.
It's funny. Okay, so I'm a flight system analyst here and flight operations at ForeFlight.
Great. So we're going to take you through filing IFR flight plans in ForeFlight, things that we recommend, things that could possibly cause some problems and how to mitigate those issues. But throughout this webinar, if you have any questions, you can ask questions via the Go Webinar message panel. There's an example of it to the right. We'll respond to some during the presentation and to others at the Q&A at the end. This session is recorded. We will follow up with a link to access it and also provide you some resources for learning things from the ForeFlight support webpage. So let's get started. We have a lot of ground to cover. This is some relatively dry information, so we're going to try to make it as enjoyable as possible, but we're going to start with everyone's favorite subject, which is the ICAO flight plan format.
That's everyone's favorite subject?
It is.
Okay.
All right. So back in August of last year, the FAA mandated that everybody who's filing a domestic or international civil flight plan must use the International Flight Plan format, or we're going to refer to it as the ICAO. So this puts us in alignment with the other nations and how they file flight plans. It's kind of like changing over to the metric system.
And yet the rest of the United States is still on standard.
That's right. But it's not that difficult, really. It's actually very versatile. It'll allow you to do a lot of things that you couldn't do in the old NAS, and we're going to show you some of those things there to help you along, because the ICAO really will make your flying safer and easier. So here on the left is the paper form. So if you have to actually fill one out by hand, walk it up to the tower and file it, this is the document you would use.
Hey, luckily we don't have to fill them out by hand anymore.
No,
ForeFlight will autofill it for you.
That's right. And what it does is when you do it through ForeFlight, it will actually generate what you see on the right, which just looks like a bunch of code. But this is what Tim and I and our team, we look at this all day, every day. And this is also what gets transmitted via the AFTN network to air traffic control. Don't concern yourself too much with the format on the right. This is really for dispatchers and air traffic controllers. Some of you may know how to read these, but this is the raw data here. So the ICAO has a lot of benefits. Like I said, over the old NAS, which all you could do was put in like a /G to kind of generalize what type of equipment you have in here. But because of the different fields in the ICAO, you can put in a lot of different things. Like you can file the RNAV SIDs and stars. You can file those Tango routes, those low-level RNAV routes and the upper-level Q routes and the Yankee routes, which are off the coast or out over the Gulf.
It also supports special handling, STS, like humanitarian flights, hospital flights, medevacs, or head of state flights if you happen to be flying the head of state.
Yeah, that would be something. But it also allows for better wake turbulence separation, because your wake turbulence category is also located in here. It lets you display what your ADS-B capabilities, supports advanced users with all these different letters, PDC, CPDLC, RVSM, cell call, a lot of different stuff in the ICAO. But the best thing is ForeFlight takes care of all of this for you. You don't need to worry about the International Filing Flight Plan format or the ICAO, because ForeFlight will format everything for you automatically. And if it's not, we'll show you how to make sure it does.
Yes, we will.
So if you have any questions and we don't cover something in this webinar, go to the support center, ForeFlight support center. You see the link down there at the bottom. There are tons of articles. Some of the articles we recommend are listed here on the left that we've written. Our team spends a lot of time writing articles trying to explain some of the nuances of ICAO and filing. You can go in there. and put a search in on any of these topics, and an article will come up that will guide you along. If you're really stumped, Tim, I'm going to put in a plug for the team here. You can reach out to us at team@foreflight.com. Say, hey, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not sure about this. I've got this kind of equipment.
That's all right. We'll help you out.
Absolutely. We'll talk airplane to you all day.
I like airplanes.
Yeah, this is what we do. So, don't be shy to reach out to us. We're here to help you, and we love doing it. So let's move on to getting the airplane set up correctly, because being prepared is really half the battle. Wouldn't you say, Tim?
Half the battle.
Half the battle. Let's get this airplane set up correctly, and then we'll get flying.
All right, aircraft set up. Let's move on. Next slide. So we have the maps page here, and on the lower right, you'll see the More button. You'll tap the More button, and then Aircraft to get the list of aircraft. And we're going to assume November 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is a Cessna 172 that we have already preloaded, but we're going to work on the ICAO equipment today. So we'll pan down to the filing equipment, and we will tap on ICAO equipment. Because this aircraft, we're saying it has a GTX 345 and a Garmin 430, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we're going to say that it has G for GPS, R for PBN codes, and we'll discuss those in a minute, S for standard equipment, which means VOR, oops, there we go, VOR, VHF radio, and ILS. If you have these three items, don't select L, O, and V, just select S. Next up is the ICAO surveillance, which is what we were trying to get to a second ago. We'll tap on that and bring up the surveillance fields. Again, this is a GTX 345, so we'll tap E, which means mode S transponder with ID, altitude encoding, and extended squitter. Then, because we have ADS-B 1090 out, let's see, we have both in and out here. We'll tap B2. If we had only out, it'd be B1.
Tim, what if I'm not entirely sure what if I don't know if I'm out or in? Can I select both of them?
You can't select both. You have to do one or the other.
Okay.
And you really want to do the least amount possible. So if you don't know, don't select anything until you find out. You could be a UAT, which would be, as opposed to 1090. In UAT, you'd select U1 or U2. So you need to have a transponder code, and you need to have an ADS-B code, but you should not have multiple ADS-B codes.
Okay, so just one transponder code and one ADS-B code, and I'm okay.
That is correct.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Next up, PBN codes. So we'll tap on that. And remember, we selected R in the equipment codes, and that tells ERAM, ATC's computer system, to go hunt for PBN codes, which we're going to enter here.
What are PBN codes?
Performance-based navigation.
Okay, so that has to do with what we have inside the airplane as opposed to stuff on the ground.
It has to do with the capabilities of the equipment inside the aircraft.
Gotcha. All right.
And so for this one, we're going to say that it has B2, which is RNAV5 with using GPS, C2, which is RNAV2 using GPS, and most importantly, D2, which is RNAV1 using GPS. And it's most important in our situation in the context of this because D2 RNAV1 allows you to file RNAV SIDs and STARS, RNAV procedures. So, without this, you can't file them.
Okay. All right. Good to know.
Yeah. Okay, Rob. So it's set up correctly. It's your plane.
Great. So now we're going to start planning the IFR flight. So we're going to go back to the maps page. You'll notice the maps tab is highlighted there in the bottom left. And this is where we're going to start. We're actually going to build a route from Conroe to Oklahoma City, but I want to show one thing that I think is really important when we're planning the flight. You know, as you plan a flight, you're always doing that go, no-go discussion in your mind here. So I just want to show an example of something that you want to take special notice of. So in the route editor field, I put in Houston Hobby to Oklahoma City. And what do I see? I see this big, angry red circle with an exclamation point.
big and ugly
Yeah,
and angry.
right. And red is bad in
Right.
aviation.
Red is bad in
So
aviation.
that tells me there's something going on that I want to take notice of. So I'm going to tap on the bubble for Houston Hobby, and it's going to bring up this menu. And you'll notice the angry red bubble with the exclamation point is next to where it says view, alert, or NOTAM for Houston Hobby. Now this little red circle with the exclamation point will only appear if there's something closed or unusable at an airport that you have on your flight plan.
Like a runway.
Like a runway, right. Runway 1735, I believe, at Houston Hobby is closed, has been closed for quite a while, and probably will remain closed for a while. Yeah. So that's just something for you to take notice of if you're planning. Always check the red bubbles there if you see one. So, but we're going to switch over to the plan we're going to work on today, which is Conroe to Oklahoma City. So Conroe is north of the Houston Metroplex area. And we're going to fly from there up to Oklahoma City. So what I do is I start by putting in my departure airport and then my destination airport. I don't work on the route at this point. I notice no angry red circles there, so I don't have any NOTAMs to worry about as far as closures or unusables. Of course, I'll read the rest of my NOTAMs to make sure everything else is fine, but I've got that part taken care of. Then I'm going to make sure that my aircraft is in there, the aircraft I actually want to use, because I've planned flights and then realized I had the wrong airplane loaded in there.
Same here.
Yeah.
You never know. I mean, you try and do a North Atlantic flight and a Cessna 172, it just doesn't work.
It doesn't work out well, unless you got, water wings. So for this flight, we're going to be okay with 172 November 12345. So I've got that in there. We've got it set up for max RPM, lean mixture, and 6,000 feet. I think is going to be okay for today. And I'm going to depart at 2030. And what you'll notice is that it's going to give us a little summary of the flight, our distance. Now it's straight line distance because we don't have a route built in there. So this is just your straight shot there. Time en route's going to be about 3 hours, and we're going to arrive at 2330 after burning about 32 gallons of fuel with a 12 knot headwind. Not bad. Not too bad a day. So, but what's our weather going to be like in Oklahoma City? Do I even want to go? I want to make sure that my weather is going to be fine. We're sitting here in Houston. We know it's a beautiful day. It's forecasted to be severe clear.
But Oklahoma City, it's going to be windy.
It's probably going to be a little windy. So yeah, let's take a look. So to do that, let's take a look at Oklahoma City by tapping on the bubble for Oklahoma City. It's going to open up this menu. We're going to select Show Full Screen, and it's going to take us to the airport screen. You'll notice the tab on the bottom is now highlighted around airports. So it just shows what screen we're in ForeFlight. And the weather for our arrival time of about 2330. The TAF tells us it's going to be fine. Some winds out of the northeast, greater than 6, and scattered clouds. So
9 knots. That's got to be unusual. Yeah, it's nice and calm.
It's nice and calm there. And we got north-south runway, so we're going to have a little bit of a crosswind, but nothing too terrible. So looking at that, we're happy with that. I'm going to select the Maps button down there in the lower left, and it's going to take me back to my Maps screen. And now that we have that squared away, we got to figure out how are we really going to get there, because a straight line shot's going to take you pretty close to Dallas Love, Dallas Fort Worth, blowing through the Class B airspace. ATC is not going to want that, and honestly, I don't want to be dodging those airplanes out there. So what else could I get?
What kind of fun you could have dodging through Class B airspace at 6,000 feet?
Yeah, not so much today. Why don't you show me a better option, Tim?
All right, the route advisor. I like the route advisor. Let's talk about how to use it. So we've got Conroe up to Oak City in there. We have the routes button on the right-hand side, and we'll tap routes, and it'll bring us one or often more than one route. The recommended routes use a combination of routes air traffic control has recently acknowledged, preferred routes, and the wind-optimized routing. We tend to recommend routes that have been recently acknowledged based on engine types. That's piston versus turboprop versus jet, and requested altitude. If the route happens to be preferred route, it's given higher priority. For example, the tower en route city pair. Wind-optimized routes are given if there's not a recent ATC acknowledged or preferred routing. Also, before selecting a route, here, let's read the small print, like a military contract that you're going to sign. You want to read the small print. You understand what's going on here. And this first one, it's 10,000 feet. So with our little Cessna 172, 10,000 feet, that's not a big deal. The first one under the ATC cleared is for a jet at flight level 300. We're not going to make that in our Cessna 172.
Not even close.
On the other hand, there's nothing necessarily wrong with it. And so we could use it, but because of that small print, I'm going to be a little cautious about it, and I'm going to investigate that Born Force SID if I were to actually use it. Anyway, I'm going to tap on the recommended route and then tap on select route in order to bring it up. And because we were talking about 6,000 feet and this routing was for 10,000 feet, it's going to ask you if you want to update your altitude to 10,000 feet.
Why not?
You like 10,000?
I like 10,000 feet.
Okay.
Sure. It's nice and cool.
We'll say update 10,000 feet.
Mm-hmm.
You'll notice that the altitude has increased to 10,000 feet and the routing has carried over into the route editor.
Right. And also our distance, time en route, ETA, fuel, and wind have all been updated based on this new route and the altitude.
That's true.
So,
yeah.
What about the Beltway 6, Tim? We probably ought to take a look at that, make sure we can do that one.
Yeah, okay. So we'll tap on the green procedure bubble in the route editor, and we'll bring up this little thing, and we'll want to take a look at the plate. So we'll tap Show Plate, and it'll pop the plate under the flight plan editor. And so in order to get rid of the flight plan editor, we'll tap the little FPL on the top, and it'll disappear, and it'll bring up the plate, and then we can zoom in on the plate using the pinch to zoom function. And we're going to want to take a look at the top right-hand side of the plate where it has some restrictions. And this isn't restricted to jet or turboprop, but it does look like there is restriction for RNAV1. On the plus side, our aircraft is capable of RNAV1 because we entered D2 into the PBN codes. And so that allows us to do that, which means that we're okay using this.
So this is a good departure for us today.
Yeah, we can use it.
Great.
But let's take a look at the procedure advisor.
Just in case we want to change.
In case we want to change.
Gotcha.
Because there might be a change.
All right.
Okay, so procedure advisor. Here we have the route, and on the right-hand side, instead of tapping on routes, just above it, you have procedure. And so you'll tap on procedure. It'll bring up the different procedures, whether it's departure, arrival, approach, traffic pattern. And because we're talking about the SID here that we're going to want to change, we're going to tap on departure, and that will bring up a list of the different SIDs. There's a lot of them.
A lot of them for the Houston area.
Yeah, coming out of Conroe. So we have a whole bunch of SIDs on the left-hand side listed individually. On the right-hand side, there's a graphical depiction, and they're color-coded, but it's kind of
it's tough to look at.
Yeah, so let's zoom in. So we're going to use the pinch to zoom feature and zoom in on it a little bit. And, that LOA3 looks like it's going the direction we want.
It's going in the right direction.
Okay,
sure.
So let's tap on LOA3. So we tap on LOA3 on the left-hand side, select it, and you'll see it brings up the departure plate onto the screen, and it overlays the actual procedure with the transition fixes, and they're color-coded.
That brings you pretty close to Dallas there again if you...
Yeah, it does. It brings us a little close to Dallas. As a matter of fact, Fuzz is right in Dallas.
Yeah, I don't want to go that way.
Let's not use a transition on this particular example. So we'll tap No Transition, Add to Route, and it'll pop it into the route. You'll see that the SID, the procedure, has changed from the former one to the LOA3, and then it goes LOA directly to the first waypoint in the route that we had previously built.
Gotcha.
Okay.
All right. Great.
So...
All right. Well, I like the Beltway, so we're going to stick with the Beltway departure here.
Beltway 6 it is.
Yes, Beltway 6. So how do we get this from the screen we were just on, the maps page, to the flight screen? Well, so here we are. We're back to the Beltway 6 departure. And so we've taken care of the routing portion. So we've looked at it, we've loaded in the departure, and we're happy with the route and the altitude. So we're going to tap over on the bottom right-hand corner of the route editor box, the little box you see there along the top, and we're going to hit the send to button, that square with the up arrow, and we're going to beam this thing up to the flights page. So I tap on that box, send it to flights, and now I'm in the flight screen. Now the flight screen is where you get to add more detail to the flight and get it basically set up and ready to file. So this is the screen you're going to have. You want to make sure you've got the right flight plan selected, especially if you're doing a lot of different flight plans. And you'll notice the flight plan that we're going to be doing for our demonstration today is up here on the left, Conroe to Oklahoma City. So I've got the right plan up. A neat feature is you can, if you needed to figure out what time to leave as opposed to knowing what time you're going to arrive, you can use the ETD ETA button and change that back and forth, because I'm not good at math, so that's why I went into aviation.
I was going to mention something about that.
Yeah, so that's just a feature that we now have in ForeFlight. If you know you have to be on the ground someplace, you can go in there and change the arrival time, and it will now calculate the departure time for you.
Right. So if you know you need to make that particular $100 hamburger lunch date at a particular time, you can tap ETA, put in that time, and it will calculate kind of backwards and figure it out for you.
And you won't be late. It's great.
Well, that's the idea.
Yeah. So, because if you're late, you have to pay. So, another thing is you go down here. We've got our departure airport. We've got Conroe. You'll notice there's a box that says takeoff. That is takeoff performance data. So, if you're a performance user, ForeFlight performance user, you will get that box if we have the data for your particular aircraft type loaded up. You'll see that in there, and it will give you a bunch of information about your takeoff data as well as your landing data at Oklahoma City. But it's really a neat feature. I love looking at it, and I think it's really handy for it. It's almost like cheating. It does everything for you. It's fantastic. Next to that is the info box. Again, that will bring up the airport screen like we had when we were looking at the TAF. If you need to figure out what FBO you're going to or anything like that, you can just tap that and it will open up the airport screen for you. Since we're filing IFR, I know the weather's good.
Yeah, I mean, the wind was 9 knots. That's calm for Oak City.
Right. But, I like to have an alternate because you never know what's going to happen. I mean, a truck could break down on the runway, a cow could walk out. Who knows?
Hey, if you didn't learn off of a grass strip dodging cows, come on.
Hey. I just want an alternate. It's just the smart thing to do, I think, is to select an alternate.
So an alternate's always good.
Yeah, so let's just select the alternate here. So you can tap in this alternate field, and it's going to bring up the alternate advisor. If we were doing this, if this was a live screenshot of my iPad as opposed to a still screenshot, the little wheel at the bottom would be thinking about alternates it would recommend to you. And after it's thought for a second, it's going to give you these suggestions. Now, our suggestion from ForeFlight is Wiley Post. It's right next door to Oklahoma City Will Rogers. It's towered. It's got a 7,000 foot long runway. The winds are going to be a little stronger, but the visibility is going to be great. And it's only going to cost me an additional 5 minutes and a gallon of fuel there. So I think that looks like a good alternate. And
well, yeah, I was just looking at the winds there, 16, 22 knots. That's the kind of winds that I'm expecting. Anyway, and I think they have a good Mexican food restaurant at Wiley Post. Or is that Ponca City?
It's Ponca City? Okay.
Yeah, they have great chips at that Mexican food restaurant.
So if we want Wiley Post, we'll tap Wiley Post, and then we'd hit add to alternate, and it would load it up in there. And you'll notice also that the info box for Wiley Post is located there.
It also adjusts your fuel burns.
That's right.
In order to have that in there.
Right. So when it does the fuel calculations, which it's continuously doing every time you make a change, it has now added the required fuel to get over to Wiley Post if needed. So moving on down the screen, we're going to look at the route. That's what our route looks like. Here's our route in a textual form, and it looks just like the one we had on the maps page, except without the colored bubbles. It shows us our cruise altitude of 10,000 feet, and that's correct.
It also, in the map, that depicts some weather. That weather is current weather, not future weather.
Right. So we know that's going to move out. It's going into.
It's going east.
It's going east. It's going into Arkansas and Louisiana. Yeah. So it'll be fine for our time of departure today. Now, fuel. The fuel policy I have set is minimum fuel required. And this is what I have set for my default. Minimum fuel required. And minimum fuel required gives me my minimum legal required fuel. So I've got my reserves, my alternates. It's your IFRs there. So we're going to be just fine with that today. If you needed to add extra fuel, if you wanted to top off because you know the fuel was cheaper at Conroe than it is anywhere else and you want to save some dollars, you could put maximum fuel or landing fuel, or you can read different fuel calculations. So that's good. We're going to stick with minimum.
Okay.
I'm going to continue to scroll down and look at my weights. All of my weights are in black. There's no red. Red is bad, which means I haven't exceeded any of my weights on the airplane. So it's just going to be me, and we're not doing a max endurance flight where I'm going to be, doing anything crazy like carrying, 100 pounds of crawfish in the back of the airplane. All my weights are good. So
they might like crawfish up in Oak City.
I might be able to sell it for a profit up there. That'd be nice. So those are all good. We'll continue down. Now, if I know what FBO I want, or if I don't know what FBO I want, I can click there and give me a list of the different FBOs. I can select which one I want. And I can also put in a fuel order, but that's a discussion for a different time. But those options are available to you there. So this is the bottom of the flights page. And from there, we're going to get ready to file this flight plan as long as we're happy with everything there.
I'm happy with it. Let's tap proceed to file.
All right, let's tap proceed to file. So here we go. Proceed to file down in the bottom right. We're going to select that. And now it's going to bring up the file screen. This is basically an ICAO flight plan in a textual visual form that you get to look at and alter if needed before you actually file this thing. So this is kind of this is your pre-flight check for the flight plan here. The most important thing, and this is what we talked about at the very beginning here, Tim, is the ICAO form type. You want to make sure that that's loaded in there, right?
Yeah, we're ICAO, even domestic flights, we're using ICAO now.
Right. So if it doesn't say ICAO in the form type, tap on that field, tap on the ICAO, and it's going to pop up this little box, and just simply go down and ensure that you have ICAO selected. Once you have that selected, you can just tap away from it, and now your form type is ICAO. And ForeFlight will save this. So your next flight plan will be in the ICAO format if you save it, if you do it this way and actually file the flight plan. So you shouldn't have to go back in there and do it again. We're going to scroll down, and we're going to look at our departure. If there was a place name is more for like if we're flying to someplace kind of off the grid where we have lat longs, but we're not going to go too deep into that. We're departing from Conroe. We know what time. It's only going to be me on board. Here's my route, my altitude. I've got my time en route, and I've got my fuel on board. So that all looks good. Legal there. Oops. En route, other information, there's some particulars in that you can put into the other information fields. We could discuss that at a later date.
Yeah, we can discuss
right.
The other information fields.
If you had anything you needed to put in the other information field, that's just telling you that there's 2 items in there. You could tap on that to see what they are. If we had special handling, it's not ahead of state.
Well, it could be ahead of state.
Well, I don't know if they're going to want to get in the 172 with me, but who knows?
If it were a hospital flight or a medevac flight or a humanitarian flight, any of those type of special handling situations, you tap on STS special handling and enter it there.
Exactly. Also, if I had any remarks, a lot of people get confused because they're looking all over the place. Where do I put remarks in here? If I'm doing a training flight and, I want to shoot, different approaches at an airport, I can write that into the remarks section, and then ATC would be able to pull up those remarks and see that. So that's where you put in your remarks there. Destination is Oklahoma City, and we've got the alternate as Wiley Post, so that's good. We don't need a second alternate. And the contact and phone fields, a lot of that's for if we're filing in Canada, right? So moving past the dinghy, we're not going over anything bigger than the Red River, so we're not going to need a raft, hopefully.
But if you did have that kind of equipment on board, life jackets, radios, survival equipment, you'd enter it in the emergency field.
Exactly. Now down here in the pilot section, we see a lot of this is Pilots don't have this information filled in correctly. Of course, you got to put your name in there. Put your name in there. Your email address. Now, this email address is where the briefings are going to go to. It's if we have any updates, if you get and expect further clearance time or an edict issued, all that stuff's going to go to the email that you have loaded on the file page. Also, your phone number. Listed here is my personal cell phone number.
I like that number.
Yeah, it took me a while to get that number.
But it did.
Yeah, so if any of you want to call up and tell me how much you like this webinar, you can call this number and we can discuss it. But make sure you put a phone number in there that is a phone that you have access to or somebody who knows about your flight has access to. Don't put in your office number. Don't put in the landline back at the house if there's nobody there.
Because if ATC needs to get a hold of you for something, or if we need to get a hold of you for something, we're going to use that phone number to contact you.
Right. So it's really important that you put a valid phone number in there, and it's going to help you in the long run. Trust me, we're not looking to call pilots just to chit chat based on their phone number and the flight plan, and I don't think the FAA is either. So.
No, but we all like flying and talking about flying.
Sure. Yeah. But, that's for a later time.
Oh, okay.
All right, so if we've got that filled in, one other thing I wanted to mention about this, Tim, is once we have this filled in correctly once and we file the flight plan, it's saved. We never have to go back in there, which can also lead to a problem. So if you've done this and you've had this filled in for like 2 or 3 years and, you taxi the plane over your cell phone and, for some reason you have to get a new cell phone number, make sure you update that. You want to make sure if you have any changes to your cell phone numbers that you go in there and you change that field. We've seen that before.
Another thing that I've seen here is where someone is a CFI and they let their student go through it because they're trying to teach their student how to use it. And the student enters their information into this field. And then later on, the pilot is flying and the student gets a call.
Yeah.
Because we need to talk to the pilot. And, hey, we can't reach them. We're now reaching the student who doesn't understand why we're calling them.
Yeah, this freaks them out.
Yeah, it does.
It kind of freaks them out. So yeah, just it's part of your pre-flight check. Make sure you got your information in there correctly. All right, so we're happy with that. Let's move on to file this flight plan. So
hey, before we hit file, let me say one other thing. In the upper right-hand corner, you'll see that Send To button.
Yes.
If you have to print out that fully filled out ICAO form to take up to the tower, instead of writing it out, you tap that Send To button, and then you have the option of sending that form to email or to a printer or something along those lines.
That's right, you do.
I just wanted to mention that. Okay, let's go ahead and file.
Okay, so we'd hit the little file button there on the bottom right, and it's going to pop up with this little box. Are you ready to file this plan now? And it's going to tell you how long it's going to be before your departure time. So the reason we do this, there's a couple of reasons. One is we want to make sure that you know what time you're going to be filing for, because you may have put the departure time in 20 minutes ago and had 13 other things happen between then and now. And also, you want to make sure that it's not saying filing for 5 minutes from now and you're not even at the airport yet, because that could be an issue, right? And it also lets you know whether you're inside the lockout period, which we're going to talk about the lockout period soon.
Yeah.
But just take a look at that, do a little mental note. Yep, okay, I'm leaving in 3 hours and 45 minutes. That's good. If you're happy with that, hit the green file button. You'll get the little spinny wheel saying it's filing the flight plan. And it will say your flight plan is filed, which means it's been sent to air traffic control. ForeFlight has cleared it. It's over at ATC. It's being kicked around by the ERAM computer. And if ERAM's happy with it, we're going to get that.
Acknowledgement.
Yeah, we're going to get the acknowledgement. And that's what we want to see.
Yeah.
Right? That means there's no errors.
No rejections.
No rejections. So that's good. That means we're on file. And you'll see down there in the lower left, it says filed. We're good.
Go.
Yeah. So
happy days.
Happy days. So also about this time, you should hear your email ding or whatever noise your email makes, and you'll get something that looks like this from ForeFlight. It's a summary of your flight. Tells you where you're going, how you're getting there, when, the weather, what airplane you're using, altitude, all that stuff. It's a nice little summary, and you get a chance to look at that. Now, one thing I didn't talk about at all on this, Tim, was the briefing and the nav log. And the reason I didn't was because Phil Inman, about 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, about 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, did a webinar on cross country flight planning, and Phil's
webinar was outstanding.
Yeah.
If you have a chance, go back, watch Phil's webinar. It's great.
Yeah, he goes into a lot of detail on flight planning and little tips and techniques that Phil has learned over the years on filing, and he's just like a guru on that kind of stuff. So we're good.
We're good.
What if we want to change?
Well, then we need to talk about amending.
Yeah, we got to talk about how to amend a flight plan. So I talked earlier about the lockout period. So
and this is important, but most people don't realize.
Yeah, this is something that not a lot of people realize, is that each center has a different lockout period. Generally, it's 47 minutes. So if you're outside of 47 minutes, you can make changes and cancel flight plans as much as you want. But there are some places that are a little more difficult. New York, for example, is 61. And before you make any New York jokes, remember I was born in New York and raised there, so.
That explains why you're a difficult team leader.
Indianapolis is 61 minutes as well. So what that means is once you get to that time, once you're inside of 47 minutes, generally, you cannot make any changes or amendments electronically.
Right,
you can't do it.
ForeFlight.
Right, you can't do it through ForeFlight.
You can if you call ATC directly or contact them over the radio.
Exactly. Thank you, Tim.
Yes, sir.
Right, you just can't do it electronically. It's if you notice on the thing on the right, it says electronic amendments are not accepted, and so it's manual coordination means calling them on the radio or calling them on the phone. Now, if let's just say we're filing a flight plan 24 hours out. Right? When's that flight plan going to hit when are we going to release the flight plan?
Well, so if you file a flight plan more than 22 hours out, it goes into a file or holding area in our servers, and it's held there until 22 hours prior. And at 22 hours prior to departure, it moves from our servers and we transmit it over to the FAA and the ERAM system.
Okay, so they have it. It's in their system 22 hours out.
Yeah, 22 hours they have.
Right. So if we're early, let's just say we need to leave an hour or 2 hours prior to our originally scheduled.
Yeah, you're good. You just
call them up.
Call them up.
Just call them up and say, hey, I've got a flight plan on file, and they'll find it for you, and they'll issue you a clearance. It may take them a minute, but it's in there.
Yeah, and also if you're late, you don't need to amend your flight plan if you're 30 minutes or an hour late, because it's held in their system for 2 hours after your estimated time of departure.
Right. So if you've got a time change, just think about whether you really need to make an amendment to the flight plan. You may want to, and if you're outside the lockout period, not a big deal. But if you're inside the lockout period and your passengers show up 30 minutes early,
you're fine.
Just call clearance and tell them, hey, I'm ready to go. If you're in Houston, they'll be happy to get rid of you. So, let's get out of the airspace.
Clearance delivery.
Same thing if you're late. Don't worry about your flight plan being on file. You still are good in the system for 2 hours. So,
a quick side note, if you happen to be in Hawaii and you're trying to file around in there, you can't make changes. Their system is not up to ERAM. They have not updated it yet.
Mm-hmm.
And if you need to make any kind of amendments at all, you need to contact air traffic control.
Very good.
Even cancellations, you got to contact them.
Okay, good to know, Tim. Thanks. If you want to look at this document, I've got the link at the bottom of the page, but just 47 minutes is a good general rule. So how are we going to make a change? Let's just say I did want to make a change. I'm on my flights screen again. You'll notice the tab at the bottom says flights. So I'm in there, and let's just say maybe I want to change my altitude. So I'm going to tap on 10,000 feet, and it's going to give me an altitude. It's going to give me some different options for altitude. Now, it's going to stop at 12,000 because I have my 172 capped at 12,000. I am not going above 12,000 in that airplane. And I'm at 10,000. And hey, look, 8,000 feet, I'm going to save almost 15 minutes and a gallon of fuel, and it looks like it's going to be great.
Yeah, but look at 4,000 feet. 4,000 feet, you'll get there even faster, which will save you more fuel. Right?
Yeah, but it's a lot cooler at 8,000 feet.
This is Texas and Oklahoma.
Texas and Oklahoma. It's going to be like 92 degrees today. So
Right.
I'm going to stay at 8,000. Tim's not going with me, so he doesn't get a choice.
No, I don't. But 8,000 feet, you're talking, what, 2 degrees Celsius per 1,000 feet is the adiabatic lapse rate, which means it'll be 16 degrees cooler at 8,000 as opposed to the surface.
See, this is why Tim went into aviation, because he is good at math. So here we go. So I'm going to select 8,000 feet, and now you'll see that my altitude on the screen behind me is at 8,000, and now I'm going to get this pop-up that says my flight plan has changed, which means the data in my flight plan is different from what we have filed, and it's just asking you, okay, are we gonna copy these changes? If we made a mistake and said, no, I think I'm gonna stay at 10,000, I'll hit ignore. But if I want to go with 8,000, I'll just hit the copy button. That will go away, and then it will say file changes. So unless I hit file changes,
Yeah, you haven't amended it.
I haven't amended
file changes.
Right. So I got to hit file changes. It will ask you, do you want to amend it? And again, it's given me the time till departure. Reason being, lockout periods, right? We want to make sure we're outside of the lockout. Right. We want to make sure we're outside of the lockout period. So I'm going to tap amend. I'm going to get the little spinny wheel. I'm going to get the big check mark. And now my flight plan is at 8,000. It says filed. I'm good. Now I should also get another briefing because my altitude has changed, my time and routes change, all that stuff. So ForeFlight's going to send me another briefing, and it's going to show a cruise altitude of 8,000 and the new weather and the new time and route, all that stuff. So that's good. You anything to add? You good?
Yeah, no, I do have something to add. So just to know on the amending thing, there are some things you shouldn't be amending a flight plan for. You should be canceling and filing a new one. For example, you want to go somewhere other than Oak City. We talked about Ponca City, having a good Mexican food restaurant. These slides were on the 5th of May, which is Cinco de Mayo.
Oh, yeah, it was.
Yeah. So we want to go to Ponca City instead. We're not going to amend the flight plan if we are changing the departure or the destination. That means a whole new flight plan needs to be filed, in which case we will cancel the existing flight plan on file to Oak City, and we will create a new flight plan.
Right.
So how do we cancel that flight plan?
Yeah, let's just say we don't want to go at all. For some reason, I'm not going to Oklahoma City today, and I need to cancel the flight plan. Something came up or whatever, and I'm going to cancel it. So let's talk about canceling. Canceling is pretty simple. Again, we want to be conscious of when we're doing this. So
if you're outside of the filer lockout period, the 47 minutes, you can cancel through ForeFlight, not a problem with the red button on the bottom right. If you're inside of the 47-minute filer lockout period, you will need to contact air traffic control and let them know.
Would those buttons even be shown?
No.
That's right. So if you're inside the lockout period, you wouldn't have these buttons.
That is true.
Yeah. So we're going to hit the cancel button, and ForeFlight's going to go, "Are you sure?" And I'm going to say, "Yes, I'm sure. I don't want to go. I'm not going." Click yes. It's going to cancel my flight plan, and now I'm going to get this.
Like the green check mark.
The green check mark means it has been successfully canceled. And you will notice down in the lower left, it's going to say not filed. So we're out of the system. There is no flight plan in there. I can continue on the rest of my day, non-aviation wise, and I've finished my work as far as that flight plan. Now, we're going to talk really briefly on something called expected routes. This is a feature that ForeFlight provides to the pilots. And so what it is ForeFlight monitors the electronic communications between the FAA computer system, ERAM, and the controller station. If because of weather, flow control, whatever, if a message from ERAM to the clearance controller comes out with a different route than what we filed because of weather or flow control, we're going to generate what's called an expected route notification to you. And it's going to look just like this on your screen. And all that is it's an advisory that, hey, I know you're filed via the Beltway and so on and so forth, but you can expect to get
Wilson 7.
Yep, this one here. So I know the flight plan route is different on this screen than what we originally filed, but expected routes are kind of hard to find. You can't always find them when you need to get a screenshot of one, but this is what you would see. You would see a pop-up box here. The most important thing is an expected route is not a clearance. It's not a clearance unless you get it from the controller. So even if you get this, it doesn't mean that is what you're going to get.
That's right. If the controller says cleared as filed, that does not mean this expected route. It means what you are on file for.
Correct. So if if a route comes in and we say, yeah, okay, I'm still going to go with what I've got, you can just hit cancel. The expected route will load in underneath your filed route, and you can hit the use button to flip them back and forth.
Yeah, and it will indicate with small text, filed and expected.
Correct. If you hit update, what this will do is it will load the new route, the expected route, into what we would call the primary route field, and then you would have to amend your flight plan to actually get the expected route on file. I would say just
we could spend half an hour discussing this particular feature.
There is more information about expected routes in the ForeFlight Support Center. If you have any questions about that, we'll be happy to answer them. But just know, bottom line, expected routes are never a clearance. They are provided as guidance to what is likely to be given to you in a clearance. That's a mouthful.
It sure is.
Sorry.
That's why we could do a short webinar just on the expected routes.
Absolutely. So, look, nothing ever goes as simple as we would like it to. So I'm going to let Tim give you the bad news about common errors and rejections. So, Tim, tell us all the ways that things can go a little bit wrong, but also tell us how we can fix these.
Well, okay, yeah. So common errors and rejections, it's not the end of the world. It happens all the time. Not a big deal. So errors. Errors are generally problems that ForeFlight discovers prior to submitting a flight plan to air traffic control. And they're going to look like this, big red X. Like I said earlier, love the green check mark. The red X means something's wrong. This is a filing error. And it will tell you underneath it what's wrong and how to fix it. It's not the end of the world. We just need to take care of it and then get back on file. So let's talk about a couple of the filing errors that are common. Big one is the RNAV procedures. For example, RNAV procedure Jeffrey 3 requires ICAO flight plan indicating RNAV 1 PBN capability. Well, this shouldn't be a problem for us. We entered D2. If you fail to enter D2 in the PBN codes and you're attempting to file an RNAV procedure, you will see this, whether it's a SID or a star. You've got to have the D2 and the PBN codes, and this is why.
Right. It doesn't have to be D2. It just has to be a Delta code, because Delta is RNAV. Delta means RNAV 1, and the 2 means that it's coming from a GPS source.
Fair enough. Yeah, I was saying D2 because we had loaded that into our little Cessna 172 in the prior example.
Gotcha.
But any of the Delta codes would indicate RNAV 1 from different sources, which would allow the use of RNAV procedures.
Right. Make sure you really do have RNAV 1 before you file one of these.
Yeah, you
really
do need to have it. This isn't something where you just throw it in so you can get it.
You don't want to be eyeballing this one.
Or you can have a chat with the tower when you get on the field. When you get down. None of us have ever had to call a phone number before, right?
I never
have. No. Cough, cough. An existing flight plan has already been scheduled for your aircraft departing and arriving at the particular airport you're going to. So this one tends to be you've already got something on file. Maybe you forgot about it. Maybe you didn't see it. Maybe you're trying to amend something on it and you filed a new one instead of amending your existing flight plan.
Or maybe I filed it for you and I didn't tell you about it.
That could happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I could be out in the airplane checking stuff out. You're in the FBO. You do something, I do something, and then boom.
Right. I may be saying, geez, I wonder if Tim remembered to file the flight plan. I'll just do it for him. And then we've got two flight plans in the system.
Two flight plans.
And one of us will get this error. It happens.
So the resolution for this is either amending the existing flight plan that's on file or canceling the existing flight plan on file before you try and file the new flight plan.
Right.
So that's that one. Next up, flight plans with the same departure and destination airport have at least one fix in the route to be filed. Okay, so this one, you are on a training flight. You're doing a round robin to and from the same airport, from and to the same airport. You need to have at least one fix in the route field to successfully file. All you have to do, enter a waypoint into the route field, file it again, and it'll go through just fine.
Right. What if we're going to go out and shoot practice approaches, Tim? What would you recommend I do if I'm taking off out of Conroe and I want to shoot the ILS?
Well, put the initial approach fix. And,
Okay, so something like the initial approach fix would work.
If it's a named waypoint, yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Okay. Route is invalid due to an unknown point. So in this example,
That was my bad. Yep.
yeah. So when you filed this, you tapped 1 instead of I because we really wanted to use the brick waypoint, BRICK, and we ended up with BR1CK. You know what? It's no big deal. Everyone's fingers tap on a key or something weird every once in a while. This is just telling you the particular waypoint that needs to be changed. You go in, change BR1CK to BRICK, and refile it. You'll be good to go.
Right. So a lot of times it's just you typed it in incorrectly or something like that, but at least it points you to where to look.
Yeah, a waypoint with like 7 alphanumeric characters would be bad.
Right.
Yeah. Let's go on and take a look at some rejections. Rejections are generated by FAA, ERAM, computer system. So this is basically, we filed it. The FAA looks at it. ATC says there's something wrong with it, and they reject it and they send it back to us. If you get one of these, this is what it's going to look like. There's no big red X, but there is an indication of what's going on and what needs to happen here. Let's take a look at some of the common rejections. So rejected flight plan, route try 3, procedure not stored. So we'd want to go in and we'd want to look at the procedure try 3. In this case, the Tri-Cities 3 procedure is an obstacle clearance departure. Obstacle departures, you can't file.
You can't file this, right?
Yeah. So you can file the transition fix in the SID, and what will most probably be given to you by air traffic control is the try 3. They can give it to you, but you can't file it.
Right. So just file to the first fix. First transition fix, and they'll give it to you there. Yeah.
Next up, rejected flight plan. The Jingle 6 star is not eligible.
So let me ask you one thing before we go into this one, Tim.
Yeah.
So the syntax of this, because this is what the pilot's going to see. So it's rejected flight plan, and then the center that's rejecting your flight plan, that's what the next piece of code is. That's not really telling me anything about what's been rejected. It's just saying who rejected it.
It's who and what specific, like the route. This is a root element. The Jingle 6 star is a root element. And the previous one, the Try 3 SID, is a root element.
Gotcha.
And so it's telling you that root element, there's a problem with it. And so we'd go in, we'd want to take a look at the Jingle 6 star. And the not eligible tends to be that your aircraft type does not meet a restriction on the procedure. So for example, the Jingle 6 star restricted to turboprop and turbojet only, and you're in the Cessna 172, right, which has a little piston engine in it. So you can't use it. And I've seen it the other way too, Rob. I've seen it where a SID or a star procedure is piston only, and somebody's in a jet trying to file it to get out.
Right.
And it's incompatible, and you'll see star not eligible.
Understood. Got it.
Okay. Reject change from KZSE. No flight plan. Manual coordination required. You know, Rob, when you were in the FBO, did you cancel the flight plan? And here I'm trying to cancel the flight plan because, the flight canceled. We're going to Ponca City now, right? So the flight plan, no flight plan, manual coordination required. In this case, what it is saying is something happened to the flight plan, and it's possible that there were multiple flight plans filed. Anytime you see the manual coordination required, the resolution is to contact air traffic control, either over the radio or over the phone, call them up, say hi, tell them what your intentions are. They want to help you get out just like you want to get out.
Right. So for anytime we see this manual coordination required, the fix is to just get on the horn, either call them on the radio or call them on the phone and say, hey, and resolve it that way. You can't really fix it through ForeFlight at this point.
ForeFlight at this point, ATC will not allow us to handle it. We have to contact air traffic control. You have to manually coordinate with them to tell them what your desire is.
Gotcha. Okay. Not a big deal.
Okay. Next up, rejected flight plan, KZAB route. So it's a route element. The Scott 7 procedure, harbor is the transition fix, but it says fix not en route. This tends to be the fix, the transition fix for this procedure. You filed an incorrect transition fix. So what needs to happen is you can go in, you can use that procedure advisor that we looked at earlier.
Oh yeah.
And you can pull up the Scotch 7 and you can look at the different transition fixes and then file one of those transition fixes and refile. You'll get on file. Alternatively, if you really wanted to go to that harbor waypoint, you can remove the procedure and go direct to that HRRBR harbor waypoint.
Right.
And go on.
And sometimes you'll also see this if you're looking at the map and you think there's a waypoint on an airway when it's not really on the airway. You'll see this error sometimes as well, correct?
That's true.
Okay.
Yes.
So it's not only for SIDS and stars, it's also for the en route portion. So again, these are just examples that we've seen in the past. They don't necessarily reflect real life. Maybe the Tri-3 is fileable now. I don't know. It may be. But these are things we have seen in the past. They're the common ones. We just wanted to give you a little heads up on how you can fix these yourself. And again, if you run into a problem, we've got a team here at ForeFlight, the flight operations team. We're watching the filings. And if you want to reach out to us, we'll be more than happy to give you a hand. This comes to the end. Tim, thank you for your assistance on this.
Thanks, Rob.
Yeah, it was a lot of information. Hopefully we taught you all something new, and we're slightly entertaining and not too terribly annoying. Now we're going
to make a dry subject a little more interesting so you can make it to the end.
Right.
Hey, and we're at the end.
And we are at the end. So we're going to go to Q&A. Got some links here about where you can go to learn more. You can watch other tutorials. You can register for more webinars. I promise Tim and I are not doing every one of these. So, but there's also, you can go back and look at Phil's webinar. Highly recommend that.
Phil's is a good one.
That was a good one. If you need to contact sales, there's their email down there. So while we've been doing this, we've had a team in the back room, quote unquote, looking at your questions that have been coming in and hopefully answering some of those. And I'm going to now get to some of the questions.
All right. Got through the rest of that video okay. Sorry, everyone, about the little hiccup we had at the beginning and having to start over. But thankfully, it allowed us to pick it back up and just continue from where we were. So we're going to go ahead and look at some of these questions now. Let's see. First question. Actually, let me start by saying there were a number of questions related to app versions and subscription plans. The version of the app that they were using was the current one, which is 12.3, maybe 12.3.1, something like that. And the specific subscription plan they were using was Performance Plus, and so that is our highest tier subscription plan. So there were a number of features that they showed that you probably may not have on your own ForeFlight if you don't have that plan. For example, the recommended route is only available for Performance Plus, but the route advisor generally with the ATC cleared routes, that's available for everyone. Also, some of the features like the fuel policies, the load section where you can specify number of passengers and cargo, that stuff is Performance Plus only, but all the stuff related to filing flight plans and setting up your aircraft as far as filing codes goes, those are available for everyone. So just some of the advanced planning features are restricted, but the filing stuff is not. So here is a question. Why does Leidos not have my IFR flight plan on file when I call them? And Tim, do you want to take that one?
Sure, thanks. So our servers input your flight plan directly to ERAM. This bypasses the Leidos servers, so they never see it.
Right, yeah, it's important to note that our filing system has a direct connection with the filing, with the global filing system. So we're no longer going through any intermediary like Leidos when filing these. Let's see. We had a lot of questions related to expected routes. So here's a couple of them. First, are expected routes only in the US?
Yeah, the expected routes are generally only in the US. We get our feed from the ERAM computer for the expected routes. So you're not going to see them in Central America or Europe or something like that.
Right, and there was another question that was asked just more recently about how much of what was in this video applies to Europe or to other places. And I'll just say that the particulars of how the filing system works is going to be very different in Europe. They have Eurocontrol validation, and ForeFlight incorporates that. But the nice thing about ForeFlight is that the overall process of preparing your flight plan, setting up your aircraft, and filing your flight plan is going to be almost exactly the same no matter where you are. So we're handling some of the complexity that's on the back end. But overall, this presentation is really focused on filing in the US, not so much in other places. But if you have questions about filing in those other places, please email us at team@foreflight.com, and you may end up getting one of these two guys responding to your email and filling you in on what you need to know. Another question related to the expected route. When ForeFlight returns an expected route that is different than what was originally filed, do you recommend amending the filing to match the expected clearance? Or do you recommend waiting to see what clearance you actually get and then updating your ForeFlight flight plan?
So there's a lot of different ways to answer that. I think first of all, you've got to, it's an expected route. So it's not necessarily, the controller may or may not issue that route for you. Me personally, when I get an expected route, I do not update my ForeFlight. I allow the expected route to be loaded into the flight plan as an option, and there's a use button that you can select, which will bring it up. And like I said, like we said in the webinar, we could go over this for a good 30, 45 minutes, but just understand that it's a heads up that this is what you could be expecting from the controller. And if you do get that clearance from the controller, you can very easily select the use button, and then that will populate it into the routes field on the flight's page. Now, if you do use that expected route, you will need to send that flight plan back to the maps page to ensure that the maps page reflects the flights page. Like I said, there's a lot of complexity to it. We thought about talking about this at length in this, but just in the interest of time, we decided it probably could use its own webinar. But you can always give us a call. We have articles in the support section for it.
Right, so next question. Can I file an IFR flight plan in ForeFlight originating from a fix like a VOR or intersection? Tim, do you want to take that one?
Sure. Yes, you'd put the waypoint VOR NDB into the first waypoint of the route and pick it up en route. So for example, on the maps page in the flight plan editor in the route field, you'd put whatever waypoint you want to use as your first waypoint in there, and you put the rest of the route. When you transfer it over to the flights page, it will automatically take that first point and put it into the departure. Then when you're up and you're talking with ATC, you'll pick it up en route.
Okay. Next one. When can we expect to be able to file IFR into the DC SFRZ via ForeFlight?
So I think maybe, Tim, go ahead.
Well, the FRZ is restricted to everyone. You have to contact DC directly to get flight into the FRZ. If you're thinking of the SFRA, you can file IFR flight plans through the SFRA right now.
Yeah, so the SFRA you can file IFR, but the FRZ you can't, and you've actually got to call that in and give a specific code.
Right. So next one, can you explain the difference between GNSS, RNP, RNAV, and PBN? And I know that this is one of those questions that could probably get its own webinar just for itself. So Tim, if you want to take that one and try to keep it fairly short just for this Q&A session.
We could certainly do a deep dive on what each one of these items is, but let's try and keep it light here. GNSS is Global Navigation Satellite System. That's GPS. whether it's the Navstar system or Galileo over in Europe, or GLONASS in Russia, or I think it's Baidu is Chinese. There are a couple of other ones. RNAV is area navigation, which is basically point to point as opposed to on an airway. RMP is required navigation performance, which is similar to area navigation or RNAV, but RMP requires onboard navigation performance monitoring and alerting. So the system itself will self-alert if it's having a problem in order to let you know what's going on. PBN is performance-based navigation, which is describing the aircraft's capability or the equipment capability on the aircraft to navigate using specific performance standards. I hope that wasn't too high.
Yeah, again, any complete answer to this question would probably take 10 minutes at the minimum. So if you're interested in learning more about the differences between those, feel free to visit our support center on our website or email our support team, and they'll certainly be able to give you a short essay about it. Let's see. On the ICAO surveillance codes, what is the code for ADS-B in and out that also includes 978 UAT? Because B2 says that it is only 1090 in and out. Rob, do you want to handle that one?
Okay. We've still got another 45 minutes for me to explain this, right? So in some installations, the ADS-B out is 1090 and the ADS-B in is UAT. So in these cases, only the ADS-B out can be specified. In that case, it would be a Bravo 1. What the out is what is specified and mandated. So that's really the most important thing. But you've got to, if it's on the same frequency, then you go with the Bravo 2. But if you are 1090 out, just specified as Bravo 1, it's not going to restrict you from going into any airspace. It's what's out is what's most important to ATC. We do have, if you have further questions on this, we've got a lot of documentation on this, and we'd be more than happy to talk at greater length.
Right. So somewhat related to that, we had a decent number of questions about PBN codes, especially questions about how do you find PBN codes for your aircraft? What are the differences between these different PBN codes? So Rob, do you want to give a brief, not an explanation so much because there were too many different kinds of questions that were asked, but where can people go to learn more about what they need to do for their specific aircraft?
Right. So Garmin publishes a spreadsheet that basically gives a layout of all the different codes for their GPS units. You can do a search for that. Really, the most important codes are your RNAV 5, which are your Bravo codes, your RNAV 2, which are your Charlie codes, and the Delta code, which is your RNAV 1. So I don't want to just stick on Garmin, but there's a lot of resources out there. If you do a search on the manufacturer or talk to your avionics shop, they should know what your codes are going to be. If they don't, we've got a document in the ForeFlight Support Center that can help you out, or look, email us just saying, look, I've got a such and such and a such and such, and we'll have an answer for you in a couple of minutes and shoot it right back to you, because we see a lot of these questions all the time. If you've got something that you just can't find the codes on, there is a document, and it's called the AC 90-100A compliance matrix for the older FMS systems. You can go look in there. It's a pretty big document, but just take you a couple of minutes to scan that, and it will have the information for some of the older units in there. But again, if you're completely stumped, reach out to us at team@foreflight.com, and I'll make sure Tim gets right back to you.
Thanks, Rob.
Yeah, and I just sent a link to that document, or to the support article with a link to that document in the chat. Hopefully everyone watching this can follow that link, or at least copy it and paste it into your browser so that you can go there.
Right, and specifically, one other thing I wanted to say, Sam, I'm sorry, if they're confused about the PBN codes or other equipment codes, we do have the ICAO quick reference guide. I think I mentioned that early in the webinar. That's just an all-encompassing document that we created, that we tried to make it as easy as possible to view and understand. That has a ton of information in there and talks about what all the different codes, what all the different PBN codes mean. So you can also reference that. So it's the ICAO quick reference guide. If you've got a link to that, Sam, you can shoot that out.
Yeah, I'm typing it in right now. There we go. Okay, so there's the ICAO quick reference guide. Definitely a very handy guide to have if you're confused about any of these codes.
Great, thanks, Sam.
All right, let's get back to some of these questions. Route Advisor doesn't load preferred IFR routes, only flights flown by other people. Is there a way to load preferred IFR routes from the chart supplement? Maybe even a capability to copy from the chart supplement at documents and paste it into the flight plan. So Tim, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. Not all city pairs have preferred routing. If you go into the maps page and then the flight plan editor and you enter something like KIAH to KDFW, relatively big airports, and then you go over to routes and you tap on that, you'll see a recommended route, and then you'll see a number of preferred routes, and then ATC cleared routes, and an airway. So if we have it, it'll be put in there for specific city pairs. But if the specific city pair doesn't have a preferred routing, it won't be.
Right. Let's see. I see more questions about the ICAO codes. I'm going to try to hurry through some of the rest of these because we actually answered all of these directly to the people asking them, but we just want to provide some of the more interesting questions to the group, which I see is starting to dwindle now. Are the recommended routes actually published preferred routes? And I'll take a quick stab at this, then if one of you guys want to elaborate on it. The recommended route is, it looks at preferred routes and it looks at ATC cleared routes. And one of the things that it really tries to do more than anything else, within the US at least, is to give you a route that is most likely to be cleared as filed. So it's looking at routes and judging them by whether or not our supercomputer route generation system thinks that ATC is going to clear it as filed. And if oftentimes because of that, it will use a published preferred route or a recently cleared ATC route. And so you may notice when you're looking at the recommended route that it is actually the same route as one of the ATC cleared routes listed below. And only in somewhat exceptional cases will it give you something that's not at all similar to one of the ATC cleared routes or preferred routes. But so the answer is sometimes yes and sometimes no. All right. Will the alternate advisor compute the 800-foot or 600-foot IAW with IFR alternates if you are filing IFR? Tim, do you want to talk about the alternate advisor?
Sure. The alternate advisor will just show airports near your destination without regard to the specific weather at the alternate. It will, however, show you the current weather conditions at the suggested alternates. If you have concerns about the weather, you should dig into the TAF for the alternate that you're thinking of.
Yeah, that's definitely if ForeFlight is giving you a suggested alternate, make sure you go and confirm for yourself that that you're fine to use that airport as an alternate. And especially make sure you check the specific approaches, because a lot of times it's not so much the airport itself that is listed as not to be used as an alternate, but it's actually specific approaches at that airport that may be listed that way. So make sure you're checking those approaches to see which ones may not be acceptable as an alternate. Here's a question relating to having to refile. I accidentally filed a flight plan for now, but meant to file for this evening. When I tried to amend it, an error said that it's within 45 minutes, so I have to call ATC. Do I have to refile?
Yeah. So if you were within that 45-minute period or 47-minute period, you're inside of the filer lockout window, and you'll need to contact ATC to cancel or amend that flight plan. If you cancel that flight plan with ATC, you'll need to refile it for that later time period.
Another question here was, does all of this apply to Alaska, since flight service in Alaska is still FAA and the lower 48 is not?
It's a good question. Yes, all the information presented here does apply for IFR flight plans in Alaska or filing in Alaska.
What are some options for printing out someone's flight plan? Rob, do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, and I think what.
Hey, Rob, you've got a case of robot voice right now. I don't know if
they're
that's
really asking is how do I like print out like a nav log as opposed to the ICAO. I'm just a normally loud person. Is that better?
yeah, I think it's better now. Go ahead.
Okay. So if we're just trying to print out the nav log, you'll notice in the upper right, you'll have the send to button, and you can select that and it'll give you different options. You can either send it to a printer if you have a printer that's Wi-Fi that you're connected to, or you can email it. You can send it to an email and send it that way if you need to print it out on an email. So if you're at the FBO, a lot of times they'll have a wireless printer, or you can do it on ForeFlight web and print it out that way. A lot of different options, and I believe that information is also in the ForeFlight Pilot's Guide.
All right, let's just do a couple more questions here. Someone says that this portion of the webinar went too fast, but how do you flip-flop between the filed route and the expected route after if the expected route is different from the filed route?
So when you get an expected route, on the flights page, you will see that route loaded in a box beneath the filed route, and there will be a use button to the right, and you can select that use button and it will flip it. And you can flip it back and forth as needed. And it will put the expected route into the route field where it's editable. So if you see something in blue on the flights page, it's generally something that is editable also.
Okay, and I think maybe we'll end on another PBN code question and see how we do with that. So this question was, why configure PBN codes of B2, C2, and D2? Wouldn't D2 imply B2 and C2?
Yeah, you'd think
Not
that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, filing D2 or RNAV1 does not imply that you're capable for the less restrictive RNAV2, RNAV5. Even if you may be capable, the FAA wants to see you state that you are capable of those other RNAV restrictions.
Perfect. And one question that just came in here at the very end, I created a flight plan. Now, how do I load my route onto my map? So I assume that when you say you created a flight plan, you mean that you're on the flights view and you've created a new plan. So if you look in the top right corner of the page, you'll see the send to button or the share button. It's like a square with an arrow coming out of the top. You tap on that, and one of the options is map. And so you can send it to the maps view from there. And the same is true on the maps view. If you look on your flight plan editor down near the bottom right of that, there will be a similar looking button, and you can tap on that and select flights, and then it'll send the route from the maps view to the flights view. So that's how you can very easily move flight plans between the two views if you want to, send it to the flights view to file it, and then send it back to the maps view once you're ready for takeoff so that you can actually use it during the flight. So we'll go ahead and stop it there. We've gone about 30 minutes over time, which is okay because we had that little hiccup at the beginning. But thank you so much for everyone who stuck around for the entire thing. There is a survey at the very end of this webinar once I hit end on it. And so if you wouldn't mind taking 30 seconds to fill that out, it just lets us know how we did on the webinar and what suggestions you have for future webinars. So please take 30 seconds to fill that out. If you came into this webinar late, or if you have a friend who joined and was having some of those audio problems that people were having, please direct them to our website for this, foreflight.com/on-frequency. If you go there and scroll down later this evening, we will have this entire recording without all of the junk at the beginning posted up there. And so you can watch the entire thing with no audio problems and no video problems. So please give that a look if there was anything you missed, or if you just want to watch it again because you just love hearing Tim and Rob talk so much. So thanks again, everyone, and we'll see you on the next webinar.